Hi everyone. My name is Yashi Davalos. I am the current curatorial fellow at the Charlotte Street Foundation here in Kansas City, Missouri. We are a partner organization of MdW, and I am this year's Atlas editor. And I have the pleasure of interviewing Nasir Montalvo, they, them, who is the founder of BQKC Archive. Yeah, so I want to just introduce Nasir as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Nasir Anthony Montalvo. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am based in Kansas City, Missouri, and I am a transdisciplinary archivist artist. And yeah, I'm the founder of BQKC, a Black Queer archive in Kansas City. We just published an article in May, so I'm really excited to chat with Yashi, who was my editor. And uh,
Yeah, so I think we can cover a few things. Maybe we can just kind of start with your start in Kansas City and some of the initial research in creating the archive, and then maybe we'll move a little into some experiences you've had with writing pieces that you have published, and also the piece that we worked on and the piece that we worked on with 60. So I'll kind of let you take it away.
yeah, thank you, Yashi. Yeah, I feel like my journey to Kansas City is like all over the place. So I came to Kansas City. So I'm originally from Kissimmee, Florida, and I feel like that's like a good grounding for, I guess, how this journey takes me. If anybody's ever watched the movie The Florida Project, I feel like it's really representative of where I'm from. Uh, a lot of the movie deals with Kissimmee living right like in the suburbs of Orlando and Disney World, and how much Disney makes people both like makes there be like a blight in Kissimmee, but also people duly reliant on Disney um, for their self-sufficiency. I'm from a Puerto Rican household, and so uh, there's like a that Kissimmee is kind of like a huge breeding ground for like the West Indies with Caribbean, I would say. And so that is a lot of my background too. And I ended up in Kansas City after moving out of college in in the up north in Hoboken, New Jersey. And moving to Kansas City, I moved for a fellowship, my first job out of college. And I, of course, had a lot of preconceptions and yeah, stereotypes about moving to Kansas City from the East Coast, especially coming from two kind of like large metropolitan cities, coming from like Central Florida, and then coming from like right near New York, and moving to the Midwest. And so, like, my first goal in moving to Kansas City was like, I need to find community, but like specifically Black queer people, people who look like me, identify with me. And it was really hard, very hard. Um, and I think especially like, in today's day and age, that was like in 2021 when I first touched down, no pun intended, in Kansas City, trying to find Black queer folk. And I was heavily reliant on, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook events, Google, and nothing was coming up. Like absolutely nothing. The one hit that was coming up was from like a Reddit post in 2017 of someone asking my same question, but it was like the usual answers of going to like the clubs here that were just like, white gay clubs with people being like, we're accepting, Kansas City's not like you think it is. And it's like, okay, cool, but that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for acceptance and inclusion. I'm looking for where are the people who is me. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that kind of was like the kickstart of my journey into like this larger question of what is the prevalence of Black queer people. And
Yeah,
yeah,
so where did your initial research begin? Like kind of moving from trying to find a third space to now almost doing pretty much embarking on investigative journalism to just find any presence of like Black queer life, whether it's at any time, like past, present, or like what is coming in the future.
Yeah. Um, so I like kind of backpedal my journey, I guess. So kind of like in my, I don't know, hero's journey, writing became like a really big part of like who I am. And I think that was like really activated like my freshman year of high school. By It was the first like black teacher I had. Her name was Miss Smithson, Christine Smithson. Like my freshman year English teacher. And I don't know, I think like before then I hadn't really looked to writing as like something that could be, I guess, a viable like career for me. And I think especially like in the years that I went to school, like in the 2000s to 2017, I think the culture is really big around, STEM, STEM, STEM. Like we need to be putting more people in technology and engineering careers. And I think it was like moments like that where like I was seeing myself like in my teacher and like also seeing that like she like genuinely like not only cared about like the work I was producing in her class, but also like me as a person is like where my writing like was activated. But I give all that context because of this, when I went to college, is when I really started delving into journalism. In college, I was working for like my college newspaper. And I was also organizing there. And so to kind of like I guess like shine light on like the trials and tribulations that like our Black population was going through there. I went to a PWI and like only 3% of the campus makeup were what they defined as like underrepresented minorities. And like of that, only 0.9% were Black students. So we were a very small population on campus. So I was using that column to kind of communicate to the rest of the campus community, like, this is what we're going through. Um, so all that to say, when I came to Kansas City, I joined this organization, this Black news organization called the Kansas City Defender, because I wanted to start writing, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to start writing on yet. I think because I was writing at like a higher education institution initially, I really wanted to write about education in Kansas City. But a lot of the people who work at the Defender are like Gen Z, like high school, college students. And so that's when like kind of like this like I guess question that I had, I guess separate to the Defender about like where is Black queer community in Kansas City kind of be moved into the scope of what I was doing, like in in journalism. So around like the end of 2021, going into like the beginning of 2022, uh, is when I told the editor of the Defender that I was having this trouble with trying to find community in Kansas City and also them not knowing who to connect me to. So like this was gonna be my project. And so I started calling around to a lot of local institutions and like doing like inquiries online. Like I went to the Kansas City Library. I was looking a little bit into the Black archives. And I think like the biggest place I looked into and where like the research began was the Gay and Lesbian Archives of Mid-America. So I remember I called the Gay and Lesbian Archives of Mid-America over the phone. Uh, and I just kind of told them that like, hey, like I'm looking for uh anything you have pertaining to Black queer Kansas City history. And like the curator of Glamour was on the phone and he was just kind of like, I'm gonna be honest, we don't have a lot pertaining to that. but I can like compile some things, put them on a cart, and like you can like look through them and see if they're of interest to you. And I was like, okay, sure. But it was I don't know, the experience was like a little disjointed for me, you know? I
Yeah,
just
could
felt
you?
like,
Oh,
oh,
I'm sorry.
sorry, I'm over here going in, so please.
I was just gonna ask, if you could talk about like what that research process was like, and I know that you had a lot of like information gaps in it, so I think it'd be great. I'm sure you were about to get into it, but I think it'd be great to like walk people through what it was like to archive here specifically at Clemma and in Kansas City, because I'm sure that it differs a lot in terms of just like the density, but also even maybe process to some varying degrees, like retrieving archives as well. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you already know that I'm a girl that loves to talk about process. So, I think that, yeah, when I called the Gay and Lesbian Archives, it felt disjointed for me because um, it's like there wasn't a website or like there wasn't like access to to the degree where like I could, you know, decide, look, or whatever freely into the archive, what I thought fit into my scope of what Black queer Kansas City brings to me. There was like no directory, no finding aids. It was really up to the behest of the curator. And that's not to say that they had, you know, malintentions, but it was like I was doing archival work, memory work within and of itself with this person over the phone, you know? Um, Me saying Black queer Kansas City to someone who's like a white old man is going to ping to him in a very specific way that, you know, may not ping to me or to someone else in a different way. And again, it's not like bad intentions, but he chose, you know, like what I saw for me, he curated kind of like that experience for me. And I feel like I'm making it sound more than what it is, but basically, after we finished on the phone, we like scheduled an appointment through email. The only time I could come in was during business hours, like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So I was basically like with my other nonprofit job being like, oh, I'm remote working. Meanwhile, I'm like about to go to this appointment at UMKC, having my Slack open in another tab. And this whole time I'm thinking like, um, I'm thinking a lot about privilege and like how many other people in Kansas City like might want to know like different things that sit in this archive, but simply can't because I have to go to work. Like I have to be here 9 to 5, and it's just like not possible otherwise than to come into this place. So that's already a point of like inaccessibility, considering that none of it is on the website, you know. Um, and then the other thing that was really sitting with me too is that um I went to college and stuff, and like I'm working for this organization, like doing news. Um, but it's like I think prior to this time, I didn't really know anything about archiving really. I was just like someone who was interested and wanted this to like be part of my work and my practice. And I think it was like a little disarming for me to like I, I guess I don't know, being treated with like this like elevation or care because like I'm coming in as someone who can like come into this archive because I have a remote job, whatever, and I can talk whatever which way. And I was also just thinking, you know, someone else who doesn't have a particular project or like a particular like I'm doing it for this organization and just like wants to look to fulfill like to fill their own, you know, whatever they want to know about like their world as it pertains to them with the Game was being archived. That was also sitting with me too throughout this process, and particularly because I had to fill out several forms throughout this process. And the very first form is like a materials request form. And like in that form, there are just like a lot of questions about like, yeah, what are your intentions? What is your affiliation? What are you requesting? And it's just like also the materials request form. I didn't even know what I was requesting, you know? And so because there was no finding a no directory. So on the back, I'm just putting like Black queer history, I guess. And that's what I was requesting and pulled for me. So that was kind of like the beginning process of it. Should I pause there or keep digging in?
Yeah. I guess we can maybe just quickly get into how like the information you did find became like a proxy to finding actual living people who had personal archives in their home, and just what that experience was like, and uh, where in that process did you decide to create BQKC?
Yeah. So um basically it's kind of getting to like the I guess like the point in the story where I finally get to the materials. Stuart rolled out, you know, the cart for me, and there were kind of like three distinct like subject matters on that cart. It was like things pertaining to some of the first like and I say the first in like the first known to us because they might be more, but like the first quote unquote like black drag queens of Kansas City. This organization called Men of All Colors Together, who was like kind of fighting racism amidst the gay community, but there's also a lot of like a dark underbelly of like the founding of the organization and the purpose. And the last thing was on this gay and lesbian variety show that used to air on public access cable called Out There. Um, and so, in doing like this research at first, Stuart Hines, who's the curator of drama, knew people, but I don't think he really knew. He didn't really know like Black queer people. Only the really the person he only really knew that fit that category was Leah Hopkins, who's the founder of Kansas City's Gay Pride Parade in 1970 something. Um, so I was getting too connected to like the queer community in Kansas City, especially the elders, but it was like the right queer elders, and they're pretty much like I don't want to say dead ends because that makes it sound like they're not important people, and they were, but it's like they weren't really necessarily important to the work I was doing. The kind of how I got connected to living people was like once again like using digital media. Towards the end of my research at Glamma, I was like wrapping up kind of there because there was like one more article I wanted to write on like how Black queer people have been erased and subjugated in Kansas City. And I was flipping through like a periodical called Case Exposures. That was like a LGBT periodical in Kansas City way back when. And there was like an ad in there for Silkies that said like the only black gay bar in KC. And obviously that like pinged something for me. But people didn't really know like what Silkies was, like of the people I was connected to and Stewart. When I put it into Google, obviously I'm putting all these synonyms for like Black queer KC, Black LGBT, whatever, African American, gay, like everything, but I'm not putting something in like Silky. And when I did put in Silky, there was one hit, and it was from Someone Start a Car. Uh, and the article was about her coming of age and like her connection to hip hop. But a lot about her coming of age was about this black gay bar called Silky's. And it was through her, and like luckily she had her Instagram connected, and I just messaged her on social media, and we had a phone call. And when you talk about gatekeepers, like it was like literally like in the talking to her and the messaging to her is like a gate. opened and like the project kind of like I don't know, it like propelled itself forward after that because it's like it was through her that like the archive was.
Um, I think when we come back, we can talk a little more about like queer archetypes, but maybe in the last few minutes we have before break, we can discuss what it was like writing about, like what are some of the ways that you wrote about some of the content that you initially found via archive and what was the process initially of publishing your work, and then maybe if we have time, even a little about like what it was like to work with me as an editor, but also like what are some more writing ambitions you have regarding like art, like making archival work visible through publication. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think with the very first article I wrote on this project, which was around the first quote unquote first Black drag queens of Kansas City, um, I was really going, I'm not even gonna hold you, I was really going into it blind. Like I was like, I've never done like an archival piece like this before. And especially considering that I'm already having these tensions around like how this history is being curated to me as someone researching, I had like a lot of fear about like writing an article that was like super historically accurate. Like that was like my biggest thing above everything. And I feel like I wasn't really like flexing my muscle in its like usual way, like my writing muscle. I feel like my priority through that article is just like I need to make sure that anybody reading this, like there's nothing that's like taken out of context or confusing. Like I need to make sure I try to write this like I guess a history like lesson. Um, and I feel like a lot of my writing has like changed since then. I feel like because of that like kind of first article too, where there weren't really a lot of connections like to these queens. Um, I was also trying to like um write the article like uh how do you say? I guess like morally, ethically, and like what I thought was best as like a Black queer person myself, and also like what like I want to say journalistically like morally and ethically sound, but I think that we know a lot of times that journalism organizations are not morally and ethically sound, but that's a conversation for another time. But yeah, I just feel like that first article I was really going into it blind, and I really didn't have an editor, you know, like the editor in chief of the Defender, like really, this is not their wheelhouse either, and I think they're the editor, in as much as they're like, you know, it's just because they're the founder of the organization and they don't have a journalism background either. And then, you know, Stuart Hines, I was kind of like asking him to review the piece because he is like the curator and stuff, but this is also history that, you know, he's not 100% on either. So, I was really scared about the first piece. I think in continuing through the project, um, and getting and like expanding like my praxis and like my theory and like my knowledge base around archives, uh, um, and other like holding institutions, but also drawing a lot on like abolition and radicalism and like kind of tying that all in with like I guess investigative journalism as the base. Um, I became like more confident throughout the process. Uh, Especially because like I feel like because I was seeing that like I wasn't gonna get the editing like in my organization and from this curator, what I was doing and I was reaching out to community like sharing it with a lot of sharing the articles like in drafts at various stages with like a lot of different people. Um, and that's always kind of been like my editing process, even through college, like sending my piece to like, someone who's my peer, someone who's the same age as me, or like sending it to a professor and sending it to a professor. Um, and I think like, um, yeah, a lot of my writing has been like informed around like what I like investigative journalism one, and my practice has like really expanded through this project, especially in this article that I've written for you, written for Midway. Um, and yeah, I think that as much as like the writing process is like a self-actualizing thing, I feel like it's also like none of this would be possible either without like editing from community, and not like editing purely for grammar and syntax, but like editing to like pushing me to like uh see new styles, uh and also like into like this like
Critical
community-based
lens.
archive, yeah, and critical
Yeah,
lens. Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that one thing that I've noticed about your writing is that there is like a versatility to it. Because I think when I got acquainted, I was acquainted with pretty much what I perceived as somewhat of an established portfolio that was like more centered around investigative journalism, which I thought was a really unique approach to archiving. But like as I started to do some of like my initial research for the Mistake Camaraderie exhibition that we worked on together, I also noticed like a huge difference because my background in like archiving and doing a lot of research like really started with a lot of people's dissertational work, and also just reading different like university press books that were around like archive or history or like mostly like pedagogy oriented things, which would lead me to archives. And since I'm from Atlanta, there's a lot of like organizational efforts that are behind archive. So in some ways, there's a lot of institutional interconnected like connectedness in archive. And then in New Orleans, where I moved from and where I still, I guess, am technically based part time, you know, archives are connected to MFA programs. For curators, for people who are like in journalism, for historians, like there's a versatility to um, archival manipulation. And so I don't think that until I got to Kansas City that I really understood what it was like to witness things having to be like defaulted to investigative journalism. But I also think that there was something, I don't know, I felt like there was a true like voice, or I like to describe it as like timbre, like there was like a vocal texture even of how to like really talk about the context of how things are getting found. And I felt like initially, like definitely, and even probably into the future, like that proxy of investigative journalism and having to write things from a radical lens is like, well, you're having to apply like a radical ethos to something that is pretty much being gate kept or fragmented or uncovered. So I think it's time for break, but when we get back, we can talk a little bit more about like the different writing styles you have explored and the different ways the archive has been exhibited as well. All right, everyone, welcome back. Um, Again, I'm Yashi Davalos, the curatorial fellow at the Charlotte Street Foundation, here with Nasir Anthony Montalvo from BQKC Archive. And where we left off last was talking a little bit about just the different writing styles that have been utilized to initially publish the archive via writing format. And I was also discussing a little bit about just my experience with archival research for mostly for my curatorial research and kind of under the lens of pedagogy. But I think moving forward, I think what Nasir and I worked together on initially was definitely the exhibition, which there wasn't a ton of writing for. But there was the exhibition was basically a concept that I had pitched during my interview process for the curatorial fellowship that was primarily supposed to be at the intersection of Black and queer Black pageantry within the Black femme perspective, and then Black pageantry from the queer perspective. And originally, like all of my research had began in the South because that's where I'm from. That's where I was working. I went to HBCU, so I remember like seeing University Queen in real time. But also just I did a lot of initial research around how that moved into organizational efforts, et cetera. And so in moving the project to Kansas City, it quickly became a lot about like third space segregation and almost even passive integration to some degree. And so I really do feel that like the BQ archive definitely carried a lot of the Black queer perspective like on its back in the exhibition, which I was very fortunate to like have. Because a lot of the research that I did pull in, I want to say about a 6 month development period, was primarily what I could find was like a lot of fragments on Black femme pageantry or just young, specifically like young Black pageant queens here within like their academic setting. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you would like, maybe you could talk a little bit about what that experience in exhibiting in Miss Day was like for you, and maybe how it was different to the way you have done like more public facing like installations in third spaces as exhibitions before. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The Miss Day camaraderie 2024 exhibition was like very like the alignment was kind of like insane because it's like right when the archive was like just starting. And I had it was like I had just finished like doing these like licensing agreements with the different stakeholders of the archive. And it's just like I honestly, didn't know I was gonna be in the photo books at all pertaining to Soki's. All I really knew was like it was a Black gay bar, and I was like in the beginning of like my interviewing process. I don't even think at that point when you were first telling me about Miss Day camaraderie that I like fully knew what material and like what the article was going to be. But that's like when I like started discovering like Kansas City's like Black like I feel like a lot of people in Kansas City don't call like the underground Black queer scene here like ballroom. It's more like pageantry. But the I guess like the rich Black queer pageantry and events scene here, and it was just like the alignment was like I feel like perfect. And um yeah, I think like just that in of itself was like surreal to me, and so. Uh, I think like being like in like a gallery was just like a really shifting moment for me, you know? I talk a lot about how this project like wasn't born because like I had the background like in archiving. It was born because like it was more so like this like leading question that I had. And so I think all of the stuff that like has come out of this has just been like surreal. Especially to be like among like artists who I thought were like extremely like well established and I even think you kind of like see that like in you saw that like in how the exhibition um was like uh framed and like spoken to audiences, but I think that was like the beauty of it. So
Yeah.
before, oh
Oh,
sorry,
so
no, you're good. Yeah, go.
yeah. I definitely felt that like I didn't know what to expect after the opening of the show. Because in so many ways, like I guess the initial concept I had for the exhibition really changed. And then I also felt like because we were in a lot of ways, like kind of creating even like a spatial design of what it's like to engage with femininity, but also really engage with. I would have liked to describe like the maze layout that I designed as a curator to almost kind of start with engaging uh like gender expression from the lens of like a Black queer person. Like if your standard is Black femininity, like how are you actually engaging with that in third space as a queer person, and your options are racially segregated. But then also like thinking about like the exclusivity of third space and how that is like in some ways like unofficially or officially like invitation only, and then moving into like the end of the gallery where there was like like a stage or a platform where there was like a drag performance later as part of the programming. But as you got to sort of turning the corner and like looking into like archives of third space that were not like exclusively Black, there were just less Black people, almost none, almost no people of color. And then when we started looking at like the sash and thinking about like the end point of the exhibition being like a foreshadowing to like who would be the winner of this like allegorical pageant, that like you're like confronted at the end with like a white face. And so I think a lot of people really appreciated like seeing uh I want to say like a lot of people had a like a deep connection, I think, through whatever artistic practice they had, funny enough, to like a lot of the white queer spaces, but also had a lot of appreciation for feeling like I guess they felt that they appreciated the artistic expression of putting that into context, because I think those people were definitely unfamiliar with Sokis. Those people knew about like Lincoln Academy and all of that, but maybe didn't know too much about what it would be like to be like a young Black pageant queen or to compete in like the Dell Sprites and things like that. And so I think people were shocked, but in like a really appreciative way, to see like almost like a pathway of like finding archival science is kind of how I felt that it was more like, but through the guise of like, we're looking for a beauty queen, you know. Um, but I think people were very like respectful of like maybe this is like as of in this present day, the only way we could really celebrate these two histories in the same space is by telling the truth. And I felt like it was a lot of different energies going on at once. Like I think there was the artistic appreciation of for just the way that the art was displayed and installed in the gallery. But then there was also, like, and there were I think there's a lot of artists who appreciated like the Glamour archive, but I think there was like a lot of all of that also shared space with Tisha Taylor being present and like the video archives being accessible and interactive in the same space. Um, which taught me a lot because I don't know, I think sometimes when you do things that are radical, they can also like just invite a lot of warmth and like love and engagement. And I think I've been learning a lot just personally that like if that's not included in your ethos as a radical person, like what are you fighting for? Um, and I don't think that it can necessarily always be controlled either. So I definitely felt like that experience was like a really beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like what you say is like so powerful, like uh from like the design of the exhibition itself. And I feel like these like I agree with like how that has come out. I think like it is like still shocking to me like to this day, like people who have like lived in Kansas City like all their life, and these are things like people are like just finding out. But I think that has been like the beauty, like in all of this, and like using like artistic exhibition and installation, I guess suspension, to like also like how people learn, you know? I feel like that's like the biggest thing that I wanted to do through the exhibition is like just come here and learn. And like I'm gonna make it pretty too, you know, so everybody can engage. Or you know, how like you said, you wanted people to like kind of have like this like shift at the end of the phase and like really have like this deep questioning. And I think it's like so powerful that that this is being done like uh through the use of like archival manipulation, like it's rooted in something real. And I think that brings it to like the point of like, yeah, having like Tisha Taylor like come like to the night of the opening. Um and Yeah, I feel like a lot about people have often asked me, and this is honestly a question I got a lot at the opening too, is like the question is always is like how hard was it to do this? You know, like how hard was it to like um find all this out or whatever? Uh and I'm like, I feel like the hard part was never like the research itself. Um I think the hard part is like especially with Tisha, a lot of our conversation, and I think this might be true for like any like collection that like someone has like personally collected like for their family, for their friends, and not like putting on like a wider stage. It's just like activating in Tisha that like this history is important and part of Kansas City's historical record. It's part of like America's historical record, the middle America's historical record. Like people like should know this. And I don't want to say convincing because I feel like that sounds like an ulterior motive, but it's just like, girl, let's be real. Like this is like important, and if it weren't for you, a lot of these things like would not have existed. And a lot of people look at Tisha and like the Black queer community as like a legend. Um, and Soki's is like a birthplace for a lot of our Black queer elders today. And so it's like people should know this, you know, and you should feel proud. And so I feel like going into the exhibitions as well, especially with Miss Day camaraderie, and why I wanted to do the video histories. Like, yeah, definitely like a big goal of mine is to teach people, but also like I want to put Tisha Taylor on. Like she deserves it. I want to give her flowers, especially while she's here. And so much of my research before Soki's was like I'm having to give people their flowers and they're dead. They're not here anymore. And that was like a really hard, jarring experience for me. I think for any queer person like doing like any queer historical work, it's like we're, through the end of time, we're always going to be encountering this part of history where like our community was being ignored and so many people died. I want to say murder, but that's a conversation for another time. But it's just like, yeah, so I think especially with Soki's, a lot of the exhibitions I have done around Soki's, like it's like because I want to give people their flowers, like please let's give them to you while you're here because you deserve it.
Yeah, I've noticed that. So like I did, a lot of them were originally in like different coffee shops, and then now there's the Art in the Loop public installation with the vinyl wrap that's at the Power and Light bus stop, which is like so oddly serendipitous because that's where Sophie's existed before it was basically eminent domained out or gentrified out, so that the city could build the Power and Light district. So I don't know. I just thought that it was like that was really something, but it's still very like obviously very powerful because anyone who does like have a curiosity of like oh, where was Soki? It's like, well, it's actually where you saw it. Like that's gonna be a huge, like, groundbreaking moment for somebody. And I think like also too, so much of like kind of the process of how I've seen the archive get developed as it's like publicized has been like through the writing, through the exhibition making, through like the activation of public space. And and I think it's interesting too because like as far as we've worked together on writing, like I've done obviously like a written interview format. We're doing a live radio one now, but like prompting those questions so that we can have like a stream of consciousness in a dialogue, but then also like in the piece that we did for Atlas, it was a little more like somewhere in between like that investigative journalism style that you have that I still think like in so many ways like you're still in maybe to some degree, but I would say like at least the way I witnessed it develop is that like trying to voice that into like more physical space. And I feel like with this piece, I chose to edit it with a little bit more of like a criticism, like an art criticism orientation. So it was really interesting, like putting those styles together. But then, like, even I feel like I'm still learning so much about like how people can experience this archive. Like, um, one of the questions I asked in the last interview that we did was, like, what are your future goals? And I know so much of like creating those video interview formats is like very unique and extremely intentional to the archive, which may not be a priority in a lot of others. Um, but also like teaching people, like giving like, workshops on how to like preserve. And so I guess I wanted to ask a little if you could walk the audience a little through like what are some maybe different formats of writing or just digitizing like the presence that people have, and then maybe through like programming, how do you see like the archive becoming interactive more through third space, whether it's through workshops or more exhibitions or collaborative research in other regions, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Before I even get into that, yeah, I think like the Atlas piece was like such a, like a grounding moment for me, and like I feel like you're like our editing process like has like really sat with me. Like I just felt like it was like again like pushing me and the archive itself like as this like I guess nebulous thing into like a new direction, a new height, and I feel like that's so important. So just like thank you for that. Talking about um the different forms this archive has took, and I feel like it's also just a product of like community, and I'm working within like the community that's here, if that makes sense, and like the resources and tools that we have like at our disposal. And I say that because a large part of like how the initial digitization was done was like through a printing press. And it's just interesting in and of itself how that came about because my co-producer for the archive is Zach Frazier, or Frosty. I always forgot their last name. Sorry, Zach, but Zach Frosty. Um, and they were really interested in the project, the first like volume of like the research I was doing with Grandma. And when I was telling them the research that I was going to go into with Soki's and like the digitization, it was just, interesting, and like the alignment even in that part and just like they're printing press, so they have the tools needed to archive. And so like uh even just like that process and like the unique ways that like Zach and I are thinking about like the digitization, and like it's like because they're a printer, like they're like thinking of the digitization all the way through to that part, if that makes sense. Like we're digitizing it as that now, as this now, and like we're also thinking like in the way that I'm digitizing it, we're also about to like print it in zines or like in exhibits. And so like what are like the print ready files, or like what are the like uh the edits I'm going to like make to these photos or like to these documents so that they are print ready. And I think like that just in and of itself is like was an interesting like way of like encountering with like the archive. There's of course the video histories, uh, and that is just born because like I'm kind of like a geek and aficionado for like dealing with like old tech. But also I think it's cool to like create this juxtaposition of like recording like these video histories on like an old Sony DCR camera, and then like transferring them onto VHS tape and having people like play with like old TVs. It's like I really want people to like have this experience of like you're not watching this video on like this flat screen 60-inch, and clicking like play from your iPhone or whatever. It's like, no, you actually have to sit here and like um play with this like VHS TV, like, oh, how do I use a VHS again? And it's like, oh, I have to sit here and like rewind the thing. Uh and I think especially at Miss Day camaraderie, it was just like um looking at it half glass full, it was just like kind of like funny seeing people like mess around with like a VHS player and like having
We
to
had a
deal with
lot
that.
of, yeah, we had a lot of like student tours in the exhibition. There were literally youth that had like couldn't have been older than like 17, and they're just like, I think I've seen one of these before. And I'm like really?
Yeah, and
But
I
I
just
had a
think
lot
like
of questions like, how do you rewind this? Like, and then there was some, I think there were maybe a couple who were just like, yeah, I think maybe once upon a time we had this. And it's, so it was
yeah.
kind of, it was like, it was really charming, like getting to see like the youth just like, I don't know. I felt like it was like a little mass comm course for them, like a little
Yeah.
mini section.
Yeah, and I think that's just like so funny to me. Like, and I feel like that was part of the experience as well. Like, yeah, you actually have to insert yourself in this. And then before we run out of time, yeah, just like quickly, like, um, I didn't really talk a lot about the public exhibitions today, but yeah, that's like another part of it too. A lot of this is putting it in third spaces. They're putting it in like low barrier to entry locations where it's like, people are coming here to get like coffee or buy a book anyway. So like come into this coffee shop where you're buying a regular coffee, and then you're also seeing like, oh, there's this exhibition, and like uh what does all this mean? Trying to activate that within people. And again, going back to like me wanting people to learn. Uh at a lot of what I'm pivoting to now with the archive is focusing on like increasing like the amount of access. And so part of the way I want to do that is through like a digital database where people aren't having to read it through an article. Like people can just like freely peruse. Um, and I also like want to activate within people, because this is a primarily digital database, and like I'm not it's not lost on me that there's still material out there that is like because it's not like in this temperature controlled like 2024 state of the art environment. I want to teach people, like how do you like care, like preserve for your materials, like in the ways that you can at home. While I'm going through this process of like digitization, I also recognizing the stakeholders have the originals. Um, and just like trying to activate that within them as well. Like how do you care for it, in the meantime, or like in the duration that your family, your kin will like be handling this. And like along with kind of like that like education, I just like further want to lean in into like public programming where I'm teaching folks about these histories, about how to preserve in other ways. And yeah.
I'm gonna ask like a quick question before we run out of time. Um, but one thing we didn't like talk too much was like the queer archetypes that you have researched. But I guess really quickly, I'm curious to know if based on like what you have learned about Gary Carrington, Tisha Taylor, and Starla Carr, and just in some ways how like for outsiders looking in, once the digital database is like more readily accessible, like some people will be trying to think about like, okay, what are the different research archetypes in terms of like performance or people that were here? Um, like they'll be researching them that way and find names. What are some maybe some different types of archetypes or maybe even just research topics that you look to find connectivity in the Midwest, just by researching in other regions as this like archive continues to grow.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna give you like the quick Spark Notes summary. I feel like yeah, there's three inaugural collections of BQKC, and Starla Carr's collection is really about like the Black lesbian experience, specifically as Soki's. Starla Carr was like a drag queen, I mean a drag king. And so a lot of her journey is dealing with like the binary of like masculinity and femininity and like her coming up as like a stud in the community, which is just like a word for like butch like in like white queer community. um and so and even that in and of itself is like not a full like of what stud would mean, but we're just giving you the spark notes. But yeah, so Siler Carr's collection is a lot about that. Tisha Taylor, known as Craig Lovingood, like in friendly settings. But Tisha Taylor was like a legendary drag queen in Kansas City, and so that's what a lot of her collection is about, and like her kind of like coming of like age and like more like persona story, and like what it means to be a drag queen, and like what it means to like engage with beauty when like you're building that persona that you view as like beautiful and beauty, and like having to engage with like you yourself and like what beauty like means to you outside of this like larger than life person that people know. And Gary Carrington is just kind of like your typical like butch queen story, but Gary Carrington is kind of looked to as like a godfather in the community. So his collection is really just like a zoomed out general view of like the history. That's kind of like a grounding point. And yeah, just a lot of the things that will be in the digital database is around third space. And like going forward, I think that's like a lot of the ways in which people talk about history in Kansas City. It's really in connection to space. It's not really about like necessarily years or like specific events. It's really about space. Like people talk about Soki's, Weatherby's, etc. So yeah.
I think we may have lost you there for a second, but I think yeah, so like for anyone who's listening who would like to connect and support the research, it seems that Nasir is definitely in the future looking to research more just around third space. But then also please, everyone, please keep up with BQKC and Nasir and everything they're doing. Just to learn more about how to obviously engage with their space and learn more about history, but just to see, how an archive can be developed in an interactive way. But I think we are at a point where we do need to say goodbye. I want to say thank you so much, Nasir, for your time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Yashi. This was really cool getting to talk to you as always and getting to talk to folks more about the archive. And yeah, BQKC will be going independent from the Defender later this year. So just like stay tuned for all that's to come with that. And it's like a really exciting time for us like that. So just
All right. Well, Thank you again. I'm Yashi Davalos with the Charlotte Street Foundation, partner of MdW Atlas, here with writer, archivist, author, et cetera, Nasir. Thank you so much. Signing off.